Have you ever wondered what happened to the men who killed Jesus? It's a question that's fascinated people for centuries. Who were they? What were their names? And what became of them after that fateful day on Calvary? These are the questions we'll explore today. We'll dive into history, legend, and tradition. We'll uncover stories of guilt, redemption, and divine retribution. Some of these tales are backed by historical evidence, others are shrouded in mystery and myth. But all of them offer a glimpse into one of history's most pivotal moments. The crucifixion of Jesus Christ changed the world forever, and the men who carried it out, their lives were never the same. So join me on this journey through time. We'll meet Roman governors and soldiers, Jewish priests and common criminals. We'll witness their triumphs and their downfalls, and maybe, just maybe, we'll learn something about ourselves along the way. Let's start with the man who sealed Jesus' fate, Pontius Pilate. As the Roman governor of Judea, Pilate had the final say in Jesus' execution. But what happened to him after he washed his hands of the matter? History tells us that Pilate's career took a nosedive after Jesus' crucifixion. In 36 AD, he was recalled to Rome to face charges of cruelty and oppression. Some sources say he was exiled. Others claim he committed suicide. But the legends surrounding Pilate's fate are far more dramatic. One story says he was plagued by guilt and eventually threw himself into a lake in the Swiss Alps. Another claims his body was dumped in the Tiber River, causing storms and floods. Perhaps the most intriguing tale comes from Ethiopian tradition. They believe Pilate became a Christian and was martyred for his faith. In fact, the Ethiopian church considers him a saint. It's a reminder that even in the darkest stories, there's often a glimmer of hope. The Roman soldiers who carried out Jesus' crucifixion remain largely anonymous, but their actions that day have echoed through history. These were the men who whipped Jesus, placed the crown of thorns on his head, and nailed him to the cross. While we don't know their individual fates, we do know what happened to their unit. The Roman legion stationed in Judea at the time was later transferred to France. Some speculate this was punishment for their role in Jesus' death. Legends have sprung up about these soldiers over the centuries. One tale speaks of a soldier who was blinded by Jesus' blood. Another tells of a centurion who recognized Jesus as the Son of God and later became a Christian. But perhaps the most famous soldier is one who isn't even mentioned in the Bible. His name was Longinus, and his story has captivated Christians for centuries. But we'll get to him in a moment. Longinus is the name given to the Roman soldier who pierced Jesus' side with a spear. While he's not named in the Bible, his legend has grown over time. According to tradition, Longinus was nearly blind, and when he pierced Jesus' side, some of the blood and water that flowed out splashed in his eyes, miraculously healing him. This experience is said to have converted Longinus to Christianity on the spot. Some stories claim he then left the army and became a monk. Others say he continued to serve Rome but secretly practiced his new faith. The most dramatic version of Longinus's fate claims he was martyred for his belief in Christ. According to this legend, he was arrested and brought before Pontius Pilate. When he refused to renounce his faith, he was beheaded. Today, Longinus is venerated as a saint in several Christian traditions. His spear, known as the Holy Lance, has become a famous relic. Whether his story is true or not, it represents the powerful impact Jesus had on those around him, even in his final moments. Jesus wasn't crucified alone. On either side of him hung two thieves. While they're not named in the Bible, tradition has given them names: Gestas and Dismas. Their fates, both immediate and eternal, couldn't have been more different. Gestas, also known as the bad thief, mocked Jesus even as they hung dying together. "If you are the Christ, save yourself and us," he jeered. His fate, according to Christian tradition, was sealed by his lack of faith. He died unrepentant on his cross. Dismas, on the other hand, rebuked Gestas and asked Jesus to remember him in his kingdom. Jesus promised him, "Today you will be with me in paradise." This exchange has made Dismas, often called the good thief, a symbol of redemption in Christian theology. While we don't know what happened to their earthly remains, the spiritual fate of these two men has been the subject of much reflection. Their story reminds us that it's never too late for redemption, but also that our choices have consequences. Caiaphas, the high priest's downfall. Caiaphas, the Jewish high priest, played a crucial role in Jesus' condemnation. He was the one who declared that it was better for one man to die for the people. But what became of this influential religious leader after Jesus' death? History tells us that Caiaphas remained in power for several years after the crucifixion. However, in 36 AD, the same year Pontius Pilate was recalled to Rome, Caiaphas was removed from office by the Roman governor of Syria. After his removal, Caiaphas fades from historical records. Some Jewish traditions suggest he lived out his days in shame and disgrace. Christian legends, on the other hand, paint a more dramatic picture of his fate. One such legend claims that Caiaphas was struck by lightning as divine punishment for his role in Jesus' death. Another says he was swallowed up by the earth, reminiscent of the fate of Korah in the Old Testament. While these stories are likely more symbolic than factual, they reflect the belief that those who oppose Jesus face divine judgment. Herod Antipas, the ruler of Galilee, played a smaller but still significant role in Jesus' trial. Pilate sent Jesus to Herod, hoping to avoid making a decision. But Herod, after mocking Jesus, sent him back to Pilate. What happened to this puppet king after his brief encounter with the King of Kings? Herod's downfall came a few years after Jesus' crucifixion. In 39 AD, he was accused of conspiracy against the Roman Emperor Caligula. As punishment, Herod was stripped of his titles and wealth and exiled to Gaul, which is modern-day France. Some Christian traditions embellish this historical account. One legend claims that Herod and his wife Herodias were swallowed up by the earth as they fled into exile. Another says they froze to death while crossing the Alps. While these more dramatic accounts are likely fictional, the historical reality of Herod's fate is no less striking. The man who once mocked Jesus as a would-be king ended his days in disgrace far from his throne. It's a powerful reminder of how quickly fortunes can change. We often focus on the leaders and soldiers involved in Jesus' death, but what about the crowd, the people who shouted, "Crucify him," and chose to free Barabbas instead? What became of them? While we can't trace individual fates, we know what happened to Jerusalem as a whole. In 70 AD, about 40 years after Jesus' death, the city was destroyed by the Romans. The temple was razed to the ground, just as Jesus had predicted. Many Christians saw this as divine judgment for the rejection of Jesus. But it's important to remember that this destruction affected everyone in Jerusalem, including the early Christian community there. Some traditions speak of individuals from the crowd who later became followers of Jesus. One legend tells of a man who helped carry Jesus' cross and later converted to Christianity. These stories remind us that even those who initially rejected Jesus could find redemption. Judas Iscariot, the betrayer's fate. No discussion of those responsible for Jesus' death would be complete without mentioning Judas Iscariot. His betrayal set the events of the crucifixion in motion. But what happened to him after he realized the consequences of his actions? The Bible gives us two accounts of Judas's fate. Matthew's Gospel says he hanged himself in remorse. The book of Acts describes a more gruesome end, saying he fell headlong and burst open in the middle. Over the centuries, legends have added to these accounts. One says that Judas's body became bloated, preventing him from dying by hanging. Another claims he was run over by a chariot after his failed hanging attempt. Regardless of the exact details, Judas's fate serves as a cautionary tale. His remorse came too late to save Jesus or himself. It's a stark reminder of the weight our choices carry and the devastating consequences of betrayal. Barabbas, the man who walked free. Barabbas is a fascinating figure in the crucifixion story. This criminal, described as a murderer and insurrectionist, was freed instead of Jesus. But what happened to him after he walked away from certain death? The Bible doesn't tell us anything about Barabbas's fate after his release. This silence has led to much speculation and legend-making over the centuries. Some traditions claim he became a follower of Jesus, overwhelmed by the grace he had received. Other legends paint a darker picture. One says he returned to his life of crime and was eventually executed for his misdeeds. Another claims he was present at the destruction of Jerusalem, meeting his end in the city's fall. Perhaps the most intriguing interpretation of Barabbas' story comes from those who see him as a symbol. In a way, he represents all of humanity, guilty yet set free because Jesus took our place. His story reminds us of the cost and the power of grace. As we've seen, the fates of Jesus' executioners are a mix of historical fact, religious tradition, and imaginative legend. But why have these stories persisted for so long? What do they tell us about ourselves and our understanding of justice? One reason these tales endure is our human desire for closure. We want to know that those who do wrong face consequences. The gruesome fates ascribed to figures like Pilate or Caiaphas satisfy our sense of justice. But there's more to it than that. Many of these stories also include elements of redemption. Longinus becoming a saint, Dismas being promised paradise, even the legends of Pilate or Barabbas converting to Christianity. These speak to our hope for second chances. These legends also serve as powerful teaching tools. They've been used for centuries to illustrate moral lessons about guilt, repentance, and divine justice. Whether historically accurate or not, they've shaped how generations of believers have understood the crucifixion story. As we end our journey through these ancient tales, let's reflect. What can we learn from Jesus' executioners? These stories challenge our understanding of justice and mercy. Many legends speak to our desire for retribution. We want to see the bad guys get what's coming to them, but Jesus' words on the cross challenge this. Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. Jesus extended mercy to his killers. The most powerful lesson is the possibility of redemption. No one is beyond the reach of grace. How can these ancient stories of guilt, punishment, and redemption speak to our modern world? They offer us a powerful call to compassion and self-reflection. They remind us to be cautious about rushing to judgment. How often do we make hasty decisions without considering the consequences? These stories challenge us to examine our roles in perpetuating injustice. They remind us of the power of forgiveness and the possibility of change. It's an invitation to extend grace to others and to ourselves. How might they change the way you view justice, mercy, and your own actions? Like, share, and subscribe to join us in more journeys through history and faith. Together we can learn from the past to create a more compassionate future. May God bless you in all your endeavors. Thank you for watching.